Good evening, everyone. I'm Shirley Leader. I'm a board member of the National Council of Jewish Women Australia and chair of its resource committee. Tana Klavansky and I from the National Council are pleased to be your hosts tonight. We're delighted that you've all taken the time to be with us this evening. National Council of Jewish Women Australia, 102 years old, was the first Jewish community organisation founded in this country, and we believe is also the second oldest women's organisation founded here. Although our mission is to represent, empower, and advocate on behalf of Jewish women in Australia, our vision is a whole society that is equitable and inclusive for all women and girls. Our focus is on human rights, social justice, and the advancement of women generally. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands from which we are all joining this evening and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm joining you from Gadigal country, and I warmly invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you are on and their enduring connection to country, community, and culture. Our Jewish community has found a home here, and we share with First Nations peoples both a deep and enduring spiritual bond with land, as well as the weight of intergenerational experience. National Council's webinar series provides a platform for diverse women's voices and focuses on topics and issues relevant to Jewish and all women. Tonight's topic, why do eating disorders happen and what can we do about them? This is an important topic. The somewhat cheeky line that we've added as a description of this webinar, eat, my darling, eat, is often said in many of our families. In my family, a somewhat contradictory message was often delivered with the words, "You've lost weight," spoken as a warm and admiring thing. A complex landscape indeed. To facilitate this conversation and introduce you to our panel, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Karen Spielman. Dr. Spielman is a Sydney-based GP specialising in psychological medicine. She combines her clinical work delivering community-based multidisciplinary care to people with eating disorders with her role as a senior research associate at the Inside Out Institute, University of Sydney, where she contributes to advancing research in the field. Eminently qualified as both a clinical practitioner and a researcher to lead this important discussion. We hope you find it meaningful.
Thank you so much, Shirley, for the introduction. And I'd like to add, firstly, my acknowledgement of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the lands that I'm coming from to you tonight, and pay my respects to their elders past and present as well as acknowledging my own ancestors from Eastern Europe, and paying my respects to them as well as survivors, like many of us, of displacement and trauma. I'd also like to acknowledge the lived experience community. In a community like this, I'm sure that there are some of us who have lived experience of eating disorders or caring for those with eating disorders, and just to acknowledge that this may be a difficult conversation, and if so, please make sure that you take the time to look after yourself or to tap out or talk to somebody. So this week is Body Image and Eating Disorders Awareness Week, which is why we're here, and we've all been pretty busy this week. And the theme of Body Image and Eating Disorders Week this year is Unpacking the Why, which is what we'd like to do with you tonight. So we'd like to unpack the why, and we'd like to give you some tools as well. And at this point, I'm so excited to introduce to you my beautiful colleagues from Tikvah Clinic, Sharonne, Symonds, and Ariana, Elias. We work together in a clinic in Bondi Junction and have actually worked together before then as well for many years. And we share a passion for understanding and trying to help and prevent eating disorders. So I'm going to hand over to Sharonne, and she will begin our conversation tonight, and she'll introduce herself as well. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Sharonne. I'm a dietitian, as Karen said, from the Tikvah clinic. I specialise in eating disorders and supporting people with their complex relationships with food. But I also come here today, change slide please, as a Jewish woman and a mum of 3. So like many of you, I grew up in a kitchen that was always full of food, family, and opinions. And I've learned both personally and professionally how deeply food, culture, body image, and belonging are connected in Jewish life. So tonight I want to explore that connection with you through stories and questions and some reflection points as well, to see how we can together shift the way we talk about food and bodies in our community. Change slide, please. So food is love and pressure. So I grew up in a home where Sunday brunch was sacred. We never missed it. The table was set with bagels, smoked salmon, piles of deli meats, tangy pickles, big bowls of salads, milkshakes for the kids, and burnt coffee for the adults. And always my Russian Jewish grandparents were at the head of the table. My grandmother would sip her OptiSlim shake while urging me, Sharonne, eat, what's wrong? Why aren't you eating? Before I could answer, my grandfather would chime in, you're too skinny. You could be a movie star. All in one breath. Love and food and appearance, they were always served together. It was culture and it was connection. But it was also my first lesson that food and body image were tangled in ways that didn't always make sense. Just a little sideline, at the end of every slide, I've got a food for thought message for you to read in your own time. And at the end, if we have time, we can chat about them. Next slide. So trauma can live in the kitchen and does live in the kitchen. So in so many Jewish homes, those messages come from love, but also from history. A friend told me that her baba would pile food so high that it would be comical. And then the baba would quietly whisper, don't get too chubby or you'll never find a husband. It wasn't meant to hurt, it was love mixed with fear. Our grandparents lived through war, migration, food scarcity. For some, feeding others was survival. For others, it was about control, making sure there was never a day of hunger again. My husband's grandfather, who survived multiple concentration camps, would never let a plate go unfinished. Wasting food was unthinkable. If you left a bite behind, his eyes would say, do you know what I went through for this? Those experiences shape how we eat, feed, and talk about bodies, even generations later. Next slide. So eating disorders hide in plain sight. In our community, eating disorders often don't look like the stereotype. It's not just anorexia. It's binge eating, chronic dieting, orthorexia, ARFID. They develop through an interplay of genetics, environment, and culture. Even in the same family, same upbringing, bodies respond differently. I inherited my dad's fast metabolism. My sister inherited my mum's, same table, different genes. And for years, I saw frustration between them. My mum and sister battling weight, and me being told I was lucky. It was a lesson in how genetics fuel comparison and shame. even in a loving home. I worked with a teenage girl, straight-A student, star athlete, constantly told she had amazing self-control. What no one saw was that she was skipping meals, living on coffee, and quietly in crisis. Her weight loss was celebrated, but it was actually a symptom of illness. And often the women who struggle most are high-functioning, high-achieving, and praised for their discipline. That's the danger when we compliment bodies without knowing the full story. Next slide. So Yom Kippur is just weeks away, our holiest day built around fasting. As a teenager, I remember sitting in shul. Stomach was rumbling, trying to focus on praying, and then hearing the women around me whisper how they'd already lost 2 kilos or how they'd earned the cake for the breaking of the fast. Even our holiest moments with food or without food were tangled with body talk. As a dietitian, I see what fasting does. Headaches, fog, and then the elation and the loss of control after that first bite. For some, it stirs up guilt, shame, or all disordered patterns. The body is simply trying to protect us. It's not weakness, it's biology. But Yom Kippur was never meant to be about calories lost or gained. What if this year we framed it? Let's use it as a day to notice how our bodies adapt, protect, and carry us. To break the fast with gratitude, not guilt, and to honor both our tradition and our well-being. Next slide. So Jewish guilt, especially for women, it's a thing. And it doesn't stop at family expectations or showing up at simchas. It often shows up at our dinner table. We carry guilt about what we eat, too much, too little, the wrong thing, the bad thing. But here is the truth. There are no bad foods. Yes, some foods give us more vitamins and minerals, and others can also give us joy and comfort and connection. We need both. I call these foods fun foods, not bad foods. And fun foods should have a place in our lives every single day. Because when we restrict them and when we label them as off limits, guilt grows. And guilt is one of the fastest pathways into disordered eating. Nutrition is important. It is my job as a dietitian. But when food rules harden, when we become obsessed with eating only good foods, we don't end up healthier. We end up with a poor relationship with food, and that increases the risk of eating disorders. So let's strip away that guilt. We lose more than nutrients. We lose meaning. So the challenge I have for you is to reframe from guilt to balance, from good versus bad to nourishment and joy, and from food rules to food freedom. Next slide. So why us? Well, Jewish women are the culture keepers. What we say at the table, in the kitchen, at school pickup, it matters. I still hear my grandmother's voice telling me, Sharonne, eat. Now I answer by feeding my children with love, without strings attached. I praise who they are, not how they look. Just like my sister and I, same table, different genes. Our children will carry unique bodies. They deserve care, not comparison. And that's how we honor both the love and the lessons of the women before us. Food shouldn't be a punishment, reward, or source of fear. It should be how we show up for each other, nourish ourselves, and feel at home in our bodies. So tonight I've explored with you how food is love, culture, and survival, but also how it does carry pressure, trauma, and mixed messages. We've spoken about stories from our dinner table to the Yom Kippur table and how they shape our relationship with food and bodies. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Ariana Elias, who will guide us through that next part of the conversation, looking at how we can build prevention strategies to protect our children, families, and community for future generations to come.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm Ariana Elias, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working in eating disorders for 22 years now. It's been a passion and a love of mine. And it started off as soon as I finished university, and I went straight into the field of eating disorders, and I haven't stopped. So I want to tell you a little bit about how prevention turned up in my life. And I'll take you to the next slide, where I was by then a mum of 3, and my oldest child was 8. And one of her friend's mums called me one day, afraid because her daughter, my daughter's friend, had come home from school, and she was really distressed about her body and was telling her mum that she felt fat. And her mum was afraid. Her mum didn't know what to do. Her mum didn't know what to say. So she called me and asked for some advice. And it suddenly occurred to me that, in fact, I didn't really feel very confident in giving any advice on what we would say to children who were talking about feeling fat or uncomfortable or about food. I was by then very, very comfortable in the eating disorder space and felt sure that if someone walked into my room with an eating disorder, I knew what to do. But it was really clear to me that I didn't really know what to do if they didn't have an eating disorder. And I certainly didn't want my own kids to develop eating disorders. And I wanted to know what I needed to do as a mum and as someone who was likely going to be asked questions during my career around what I should do or what someone should do if their younger children came to them with questions about body and food. So I went to the research looking for the answers before I answered my friend. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a single resource that was comprehensive enough and satisfied all the questions that I had around what we needed to do to prevent the development of eating disorders. And so I approached one of my colleagues and begged her to join me and write a program on prevention. And together we spent about a year developing what became Raising Body Confident Kids, a program which was really focused on what we could do as parents to help protect children from developing eating disorders. And through our work, we came to understand that, in fact, if we wanted to prevent the development of eating disorders, we really wanted to focus on body image. And we really wanted to protect our children from developing body dissatisfaction. So that became the focus of this Raising Body Confident Kids program. And we created this very big program, which had 8 modules that we started to run in schools and community centres and in private functions, which really focused on prevention. We chose body dissatisfaction as the key target for our program because the literature was very clear in that it was the single most robust risk factor in the development of eating disorders. So I had an ambitious dream that if I could help protect kids from developing body dissatisfaction, then maybe I could reduce the eating disorder rates in the little micro community that I was living in. Next slide, please. So what's super important for us to think about when we think about body image and body dissatisfaction is actually what it is and how it develops. We know that bodies come in all weights, shapes, and sizes. And in fact, the actual body weight and shape and size that you are is not the problem in our society. It's actually just how we feel. So we know that kids and adolescents and adults who come in all these different shapes and sizes can feel really uncomfortable in their skin, really good in their skin, and kind of neutral. And so it's not actually about how you are in your size, but it's about how you feel in your size. And we know that children can be happy in the body they're meant to be in, as long as the influences around them don't give them reason to be unhappy. Slide, please. So when a child or when an adolescent or when an adult doesn't feel satisfied with their body, whatever their body weight shape might be, they tend to start engaging in behaviors that are designed to change their body. And that's when we start to see problems. So we really, really want to focus on helping people feel comfortable in their skin and not feel that whatever body they are, it's a problem and needs to be targeted. Slide, please. So tonight, I want to focus on a small part of the first module that was created for the Raising Body Confident Kids program. And it's just a little part of the food section of the module. This program was huge and long, and we have this little small amount of time tonight. So I'm just going to take you through some of the information from the food section in the hope that I could leave you tonight with a little more confidence and a little more knowledge around what you can do practically to help protect your children from body dissatisfaction. Slide, please. And I'd like to start with family meals, which is such an integral part of our culture, and the coming together and sharing food, which is so important for us Jews and seems so natural and easy, but actually can sometimes become very difficult to execute in meaningful and helpful ways. We know that family meals actually trump all other variables in raising healthy and happy children. Slide, please. So we know that family meals have many benefits. We know that children get along better with others if they're having more family meals. They perform better at school. We know that they are experiencing less depression, suicidal ideation, and attempts. We know that these children will engage with less alcohol, less tobacco, and less marijuana. We know that these children get an opportunity to watch how to eat a really balanced, healthy variety of foods without judgment. And we know that family meals promote a more balanced way of eating. And the data shows us that children that are part of a family meal structure tend to eat more fruits, vegetables, grains, vitamins, minerals, and fewer non-nutritious meals. Slide, please. So what can we do? We really want to focus on connection with family meals. When our kids or when our family members come to the table, we really want to engage them as humans. We want to talk to them about their day. We want to find out what's going on with them. We want to use the time to have a lot of fun, a lot of reflection, and we want it to be a very welcoming place for them to turn up and not something that's tense. So we want to make the eating experience really positive. And sure, we can't be cooks or we can't be chefs or we can't be providing food for everyone's likes and dislikes exactly, but we really want to try and make the meals things that our children like to attend so that there's more harmony at the table. We want to model balanced eating, which means that we want to introduce them to all the food groups, and we want to show them that we can eat without fear or guilt or judgment, and that it's really normal to have all the food groups on our plate at the dining room table or wherever it is that we eat. And we want to prioritize routine and not perfection. So many of us have super complicated weeks. We have partners that might not come home for dinner. We have children at sport. We have kids that might need to study. We might be doing lifts. We might be coming home late ourselves, going to theatre, going to plays. I mean, there's tons of things that take us away from the traditional family dinner. So it's not about giving yourself a hard time that you can't have a family meal every single day. It's about when you can to do it. It's not about always being at the dining room table and making it look like we think it should look. It can be a picnic in a park. It can be all of us in the car. It can be walking along together as we get from point A to point B. It's really just about being together and giving our kids a really positive experience of eating together. We want to encourage our children to eat autonomously, which means that we don't serve them and give them a sense that they can only eat what they're given, but that can choose what they want and they can feel really confident and comfortable that the food on the table is there for them to eat. And we really want to avoid any conversations at mealtimes about food, shape, and weight, which is otherwise known as fat talk. And all of these strategies will help family meals feel positive and pleasant for our kids, which will ultimately benefit them. Slide, please. So what is fat talk exactly? Fat talk is all language and comments about appearance, weight, shape, and size, regardless of whether the statements are positive or negative, that reinforce the thin or muscular beauty ideal. Slide, please. Some examples of fat talk, and there are tons of them, so I've just pulled out a few, are things like, I feel so fat today. I can't eat that, I'll gain weight. I've eaten so badly today, it's embarrassing. She's so skinny, I look massive next to her. Or we're so naughty for eating this chocolate. This type of chat probably sounds pretty normal. We probably all find ourselves speaking like this without even realizing. But unfortunately, this chat can be really harmful. And research has consistently shown that chat like this has negative psychological, social, and even physical health consequences. And here's how. When we use fat talk, or when we speak with fat talk, the speaker is harmed. So saying things like, I feel so fat, reinforces self-criticism and body dissatisfaction. And over time, it increases the risk of body dissatisfaction, depression, and eventually other eating disorder symptoms. It harms the listener because hearing someone else fat talk makes the listener feel more likely to compare themselves, feel worse about their own bodies, and fear they're being judged. It's contagious. So when we hear people berating their bodies, we tend to join in and suddenly speak that way about ourselves or think that way about ourselves. And it reinforces harmful stereotypes because fat talk normalizes the idea that being in a larger body is undesirable and not okay. And this fuels weight stigma, which is linked to poorer mental and physical health outcomes. And this is independent of body size. We also know that fat talk traps people. They're trapped in a cycle, and research shows us that fat talk and body dissatisfaction is mutually reinforcing. The more you engage in fat talk, the worse you feel. The worse you feel, the more you engage in fat talk. We also know that fat talk doesn't motivate you to make better choices with your food or with exercise. And I can tell you that very few patients of mine who eventually end up in my room with eating disorders don't have memories of hearing their parents speak negatively about their bodies or about the food they eat. So the way we speak is really, really impactful. Slide, please. So what can we do? And there's a lot we can do. First, we need awareness. We need to know what fat talk is. We need to be able to recognize it. And once we recognize it, we need to pause when we hear it and consider, before we start food or body shaming ourselves, whether it's with our own experiences or with someone else, really consider if you need to respond at all. And if you do need to say something, perhaps you could say something a little bit more neutral, or what you notice. Like, I really like the meal, rather than, oh my God, I feel so full after that meal. I definitely don't need dinner. Focus on valuable things in self and in others. Talking and paying attention to qualities in yourself and others that aren't appearance-based is so much more meaningful than talking about food and the way you look. Effort, kindness, humor, creativity, curiosity in others will have a much greater impact on the person's sense of identity than will how we speak about our bodies. We also know that we can model body neutral and body and food talk that's neutral, which means instead of weighing in and buying into the moral good and badness of food, we can just stick to whether we liked it or didn't like it, the combination of the tastes, and we can set gentle boundaries. We really have a chance to either disengage from conversations about bodies and food that make us feel uncomfortable. We can change the subject almost without anyone realizing. And if we have enough courage, we can let the person who's speaking about food and bodies in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable, that we really can't engage with them because it makes us feel bad. And we don't want to do that anymore. So thank you for being here tonight and listening to these few tips and bits of information that I hope you can take away and make your home life feel a little bit safer around the way you speak and the way that you think about food and body. Now I hand you over to Karen.
Thank you, Ariana. So how lucky am I to get to work with these guys, huh? So I'm just going to change my view. There we go. I don't like just talking to myself, although my family may disagree. So you can see that there's a whole lot of things that contribute or can contribute to the risk of people developing eating disorders. And I'm going to ask you, Tana, to go to the next slide. Thank you very much. And so my part of the talk is my part of the talk tonight is, what do you do if you suspect that you or a loved one actually has developed an eating disorder? So I'm hoping we'll give you some tools and tricks. Next slide, please. Because eating disorders really are very serious and very dangerous conditions. The most popular, the one that we know most about is anorexia. The anorexia nervosa is the most well known of the eating disorders. It's actually not quite as common, as we'll see in a little while, but it probably is the most serious of all mental health conditions, including schizophrenia and depression and anxiety, and it has the highest mortality rate. Eating disorders affect every body system and have serious short and long-term effects on both the mind and the body. And they affect not only the individual who suffers, but also their families and their communities. So if nothing else, I would like you to take away tonight that you must take it seriously. If you suspect that you or your loved one has an eating disorder, do not ignore it. I've just put up on the screen just some really simple guidelines for when to worry, that hopefully by the end of the talk you'll understand a little bit more about it. But if you're wondering whether to worry, especially with young people, the development of an eating disorder can be an emergency and you must seek help urgently, particularly if somebody has lost weight with a restrictive eating disorder. Around about 1 kilo a week for 3 weeks is kind of a rough guideline for when to be more urgently concerned, or if they have a very slow heart rate compared to normal, or if they have some acute mental health issues like suicidality. Next slide, please. And just to give you a sense of actually how big this problem is, about 1.2 million Australians suffer from eating disorders, which is 4% of the population. I don't know how many kids are in classrooms these days, but that's at least one child in every classroom. So you can imagine in a school, in our communities, that's a lot of people. It costs a staggering $21 billion. I think that's on the next slide. Thank you. And the next one after that. A staggering $21 billion to the community each year, and non-financial or indirect costs of $46.1 billion. I saw that slide and my mind boggled. It's an extraordinary cost financially, let alone in other ways. So it's really important that you're here and that you're raising the awareness of how serious these conditions are and how important it is to seek treatment, because particularly the earlier that we identify and treat eating disorders, the easier they are to treat. So next slide, thank you. I will just take you pretty quickly through why and how they develop. I'm going to use some slides that I use when I teach my GP colleagues. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. I won't go through each bit particularly, but I want you to just take a look at the following with a personal lens after having heard what Sharonne and Ariana have shared with us, and just have a think about what resonates. I use this when I see patients for the first time. It's quite validating. It's really important to understand that there's not one cause of eating disorders. Obviously, body dissatisfaction is really important, but there are many, many other things that contribute to the development of eating disorders. And you can see that there's potentially an additive effect. So we'll just go through the next few slides quite quickly, please. So you can see that there are certain risk factors that exist in the family. And if we think about our Jewish community, then I'll tell you when to go next. Sorry, I'm slowing down now. Sorry. You can see in our community there are some of these issues that may be more prevalent in our community. Next slide, thank you. And the society particularly, often people ask me, what do you think causes eating disorders? Is it social media? It's obviously a contributor, but it's not the only one. And you can see that, like both Ariana and Sharonne have talked about, the emphasis on thinness and body shape is a really big risk factor in our community. Next slide, thanks. And personal risk factors, you can see a long list there. And sometimes when I show this list to patients, I don't ask them to say anything, but I can just see them nodding. And you know, the more of these vulnerabilities that you might have, the more careful we need to be. And the next slide shows us that the risk factor of dieting and weight loss. So you can see if somebody has quite a number of those vulnerabilities on the previous slide, and then they're in a context that might encourage or reward dieting and weight loss, you're really setting somebody up to be really at risk of developing an eating disorder. So what happens next slide, thanks, is that we get the beginning of an eating disorder, and eating disorders thrive in secrecy. The kinds of things that happen: hunger is ignored, body dissatisfaction, and secrecy. And then next slide, that's when things really take over. And the kinds of symptoms that people, or the behaviors that people develop at this point, it's almost like it goes away from it. I've forgotten the word I'm thinking of, but you know, you don't have control over it at this point. Some of these things are actually physiological in the way that our brains respond to starvation and to hunger. So there can be an extreme fear of weight gain, total preoccupation with food, weight, and shape, which we know from research is actually quite biological. And then these kinds of control behaviors that become more and more frequent and intense. Next slide, thanks. You can see in my next slide that the eating disorder symptoms can affect so many different body systems. So in each body system, you can like see, for example, the lowered metabolic rate, or dental issues, headaches. I won't go through the list, but there really are many and varied ways that restriction or other eating disorder behaviors can impact the body. It's quite scary. Having said that, everybody is individual, and sometimes people have few symptoms, some people have a lot of symptoms, and that's one of the challenging things for health practitioners, is to recognize the differences in the patterns of presentation. Next one, thanks. There are also impacts not just on people's bodies, of course, and you might recognize the kinds of things that happen. For example, people will start saying no to going out to meals, or their relationships will be impacted because they become preoccupied with food or body rather than on interacting with their partner, or their educational achievements may be reduced because of concentration issues. Next slide, thanks. So what happens if you are worried? The first thing to do is put on your own oxygen mask before you confront somebody, or before you try to get help. The first thing to do is just to slow down, take your time, check yourself, get some information, and talk to some friends or your GP, or get some information from places like the Inside Out Institute, Butterfly Foundation, or Eating Disorders Family Association. We haven't actually given a list of resources, but we can, if needs be, we might send that out a bit later. Next slide, thanks. It's really important to have a non-judgmental attitude when you're trying to talk to somebody about how to get help. Eating disorders are not just about eating. It's important to think about the underlying issues that might contribute to it, and not just to blame the person or their attitudes about food. Next slide will show us a bit more about some questions that we can ask and how to start the conversation. I really like the question, how is your relationship with food? But using sensitive language, avoiding judgment, validating people's feelings, asking open-ended questions, and normalizing questions. Thanks so much. Next one. I don't want you to pay too much attention. This is just, there's no exam on this at the end, but this is just to show you that there are a whole lot of different ways that eating disorders can present. Anorexia is one less common presentation. Bulimia is a little bit more common, but the most common of these is the binge eating disorder, which we're learning more and more about, and is actually quite significantly more prevalent than anorexia or bulimia. You may have heard of ARFID, which is a more recent diagnosis, which occurs in younger people and maybe neurodiverse people and those with other anxiety or food phobias. And the ones down the bottom I wouldn't really worry about at all at the moment. Next slide will show us that we really need to keep in mind at the moment that eating disorders are also quite prevalent in those seeking weight loss treatments, and really important as a community when we find ourselves talking about weight loss and people are talking about how they get treatment and the new injectables or bariatric surgery, to remember that it can be as high, depending on which surveys you look at, 20 to 80% of people seeking help for weight loss have actually got eating disorders. So really important to screen or think about eating disorders in these cohorts. Next slide. So what do we actually do? We need to get a team around us. If we're wanting to get help for our friends, our kids, really important to make a team around us. It's really impossible to treat these illnesses on their own. A doctor, a dietitian, and a psychologist are your minimum team. I would really encourage you to be an advocate for your family members. Keep trying until you have good people around you, until you feel like there's a good match, somebody who's expert and able to help with the situation. Thank you very much. Next slide. And what we're actually aiming for is a full life where people are able to think about friends, family, career, animals, all sorts of other things, rather than just being focused on the eating disorder. And again, this is something that we work together with our team members to really implement very personalized individual treatments. And next slide. I'm just looking at the time. We need to leave time for questions as well. So please don't give up hope. We really absolutely can help. There are lots of treatments available. There's lots of research happening, and most people can recover totally. A small proportion won't. So it's really important to get treatment as early as possible and as good treatment as possible. And this is our beautiful team at Tikvah, hanging out and talking about how we can help. Last slide is just a message from all of us to all of you, that as women, we have the power to really uplift and empower each other with a strong community and supporting each other. We can achieve great things and create positive change in the world. Thanks so much for listening, and we'd really be very happy to answer questions. I can see that there's a few in the Q&A already. So let's open that up to everybody. Let's have a little look. Do you want me to read out some questions, guys, or will one of you go? Yeah. Okay. So this is a beautiful question about ARFID. Someone has been diagnosed with ARFID and absolutely do have to think about what I eat all the time, as if I eat anything more than my daily allowance or specific foods, I'll put on weight. And at only 5 foot tall, I don't have enough body frame for excess weight. When I'm overweight, I look really awful, and I'm also too heavy to exercise efficiently and really uncomfortable. That's a difficult question, isn't it? I mean, ARFID's a little bit different to other eating disorders, in that it doesn't necessarily have the same focus on food, on appearance. So there's potentially a bit of an overlap here, and I would certainly encourage some individual treatment. What would you guys say, Sharonne, Ariana?
Yeah, I guess theoretically ARFID by definition doesn't have a crossover with body image or that desire to be thin. It's more specific to food aversions or sensory sensitivities or aversive outcomes, so fear of vomiting or having I guess this kind of also answers the next question, what is ARFID? So what I would recommend for this question would be what Karen alluded to, is that team approach, is to set yourself up with a great GP, a dietitian, a psychologist to help you with that whole person approach. And exercise, if there's an exercise element to support as well, so that you can tackle each element together with the team, as it's not a one-stop shop. You need all puzzle pieces to fit together.
Do you want to add anything, Ariana?
No, that's good. I can't see the questions, so I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. BED is binge eating disorder is the next one. So the question of what is that? So that's one of the most common eating disorders. Do you want to take that one, Ariana, or will I read that? You're better.
I can't see.
Oh, no, what is binge eating disorder?
Binge eating disorder, by definition, without going to the DSM, is eating more food in a sitting than would be typically consumed in an ongoing way without a compensation behavior to follow. So we eat more than we should at a meal, and we eat more in totality, but we don't compensate the way we tend to see in bulimia. Is there more to that one? That again, I can't see anything.
No, that's good. I'd also like to just put in a little plug at the with that point to the new Inside Out e-therapies page. So there's a terrific online self-guided modular treatment for binge eating disorder, and so it has a screener on it. If you Google Inside Out e-therapies clinic, it's got some free and evidence-based effective treatment for binge eating, which essentially is trying to help people to move towards a more regular eating pattern and to understand the underlying reasons for the change in the patterns, really. Yeah.
I can see them now.
Oh, you can see them. Good. Excellent. Excellent. I think that one's for you. My daughter, who's about to turn 6, since starting school, has been coming home at various intervals asking whether she looks fat. She's tall, slim, and athletic, and I default to saying, of course not. I understand now that's not the best response. What is the correct response? And I'm gobsmacked that she's even being exposed to that in kindergarten, which is extraordinary.
This is exactly the thing that was asked of me when my daughter was 8. So you want the answer. You want to know what we're meant to do. The the first thing, to be honest, when a child comes home, what's the question? She's been coming home and asking whether she looks fat, is actually just trying to find out what the child means, because we tend to bring our adult fears, concerns, interpretations to our children. And then we answer them as if their thoughts about fat are the same as ours, when generally they're not yet formed the way ours are. So rather than answer with no, you're not, which accidentally reinforces that if you were, it's a bad thing, we just want to take a step back from it all and ask them, well, what does that actually mean? And allow them to just explore and explain to you what they're trying to tell you, and try and just keep the space really open for them to share their feelings around what's going on, rather than we answer in ways that tries to make them feel better, but we don't really know what it is that's going on for them. And yes, kindergarten is absolutely, definitely where it starts, which is very frightening. But if we think about what children are being exposed to from the beginning of time, they're seeing us as parents, they're seeing people singing, so they're seeing like pop stars, they're seeing cartoons, they're reading, in our day it was golden books. I'm not sure what they're reading at this age, what we're reading to them, but they're always seeing that the beautiful character who marries the prince and lives happily ever after is pretty and skinny and curved beautifully. So from a very early age, they're consuming the idea that something is good and will be rewarded and other things are not. So it's not surprising that from as young as 4, 5, 6, our kids already have a sense about good bodies and bad bodies, and we don't want to buy into it. And so we want to keep that home environment really neutral, really positive, and allow them to feel comfortable in their own skin without feeling like they need to look like the young ladies that they see in their cartoons or the movies or the TV shows or singing on TV.
I think that feeds into the next question too, which is how we do that when we're older and people are making the same kinds of comments. And now, especially with the focus on Ozempic and other weight loss drugs, like how do you not get sucked into it? I think your answer is probably quite translatable, isn't it, to grown-ups as well.
And it's the fat talk stuff, because Ozempic chat is fat talk. And as you all might notice, you feel bad and you start to question yourself, and you start to question whether you should be, doing more or changing the way you feel about the way you eat, or your relationship to the way you eat, or the conversations. And if you can notice that it's making you feel uncomfortable, you either want to disengage, change the subject, or just ask them if they wouldn't mind not talking about it because you find it really hard listening to those topics. But fat talk's really normal and it's really hard to avoid. We just got to be cautious because of how damaging it is to everyone that is around that conversation.
Yeah. And as a society, agreeing to value different things really, I think is so important, isn't it? Just to take the focus off, not labeling things, not using those kinds of terms as well, talking about different things, taking the focus off it. Totally. Last question is about dieting, losing weight, feeling good, and then immediately resuming your previous eating pattern and watching the weight go back on and doing nothing about it. That's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, research shows that weight cycling and dieting just is a totally ineffective way of losing weight if that's what you want to do. Yeah. Either of you want to jump in for the last one?
As in to stay with this a little bit?
Yeah.
So just following what Karen said, the research shows us that the single greatest way to get heavier in time is to diet, because over time, your metabolism gets sluggish and it gets less and less capable of managing food. So it's so important that our kids don't start dieting young and continue to diet, or they'll one day look back at photos of themselves, as many, adults might, and really wonder why they started dieting back then, because compared to where they are now, they would be just so happy and grateful if they looked like they did now as they did then. And that's because we just do get heavier and heavier across time if we put a lot of strain on our metabolism by dieting. And when we think about the origins of eating disorders, and there are obviously many, and I only spoke about one little thing, and Karen's could have talked about lots of different things. But one of the things that we know about eating disorders is that when people are unhappy, for whatever different reason it is, and it could have absolutely nothing to do with their body, they're just unhappy and they don't know what to do about it. They just look around in society and they see that people who are skinny and dieting and losing weight and talking about it seem to be the ones that are happy and seem to be popular and seem to be very successful. And that becomes really alluring. And so people that are unhappy are really tempted to try and find happiness through their body. But it's really short-lived, because bodies don't allow us to find the sort of happiness that we're looking for when we're unhappy. So if you find yourself in a bit of a trap and you're a bit caught and you notice that you're not feeling good and you want to feel good, we don't want to go down the path of dieting, because that's just going to trap us in another problem. We want to really just try and work out what it is that's making us feel unhappy. And it's definitely not going to be solved with dieting.
Great place to end.
I do have one private message from someone who can't access the Q&A that I feel is important to ask. She says, "It's very apparent that a friend of mine has an eating disorder. I love the questions about curiosity, but how could you encourage her to seek help urgently? Any guidance on kind words and approach?"
Do you want to take that one?
Anyone?
Look, I think it's as urgent as if a friend had expressed some suicidal ideation. I think anorexia is such a dangerous condition. I would be doing everything I could to show them how much I cared for them and how much I loved them and how important it was for you to see them seeking help, and to ask them maybe what is, what they would like, how you could help them. You could ask who they trusted that they could confide in to support them. Talk to family members. I really think it's very important to show some hope, say that it's a treatable condition. If there's anything that you can do to go with them, to make them an appointment, give them some information, look at the Inside Out website or the Butterfly website. Lots of stories of other people in similar situations.
I'll just add two things. One thing is, it's really helpful, no matter how scary it is, to approach someone who you think has an eating disorder, to ask if they're okay, because so many people with eating disorders eventually end up in treatment and speak about the silence that was around them. And the silence actually made them think no one noticed and made them think that there was no problem here. So you can never be blamed for caring. You're never going to be in trouble for showing someone that you care. So just asking, are you okay, is I think, really important step. And just remember that even though it might be received poorly, it's just coming from a place of love, and the person will absolutely, definitely know it's coming from a place of love.
Okay, that's all the questions. I will remove your spotlights and say some final words. So first of all, on behalf of the National Council of Jewish Women Australia, we would like to extend our deepest thanks to our wonderful speakers, Sharonne, Ariana, and Karen. Thank you for sharing your expertise and tools with us. We understand this has been a busy week of webinars for you, and we are grateful for your time. This conversation is so important during Body Image and Eating Disorders Awareness Week. It reminds us that eating disorders are not rare in our Jewish community, and they are not a personal failing. They are serious, complex illnesses. By coming together tonight, we've taken an important step towards breaking the stigma. Thank you to our facilitator, Shirley Leader, for your thoughtful introduction this evening. And of course, thank you to all of you who joined us this evening for your presence, engagement, and important questions. As you all leave tonight, let's continue to keep these conversations alive and to build up our community so no one feels alone in their struggles. We encourage you to seek support if any of the materials this evening were confronting or triggering. If you enjoyed this evening's event and would like to stay engaged with National Council, we warmly invite you to join us for the book launch of Ruptured on Wednesday next week, the 10th of September in Sydney. For those of you in New South Wales, this will be hosted by National Council of Jewish Women Australia, New South Wales, and the Shalom Collective. I'm going to send a link in the chat if you'd like to register. And for those not in Sydney, we will host more webinars and events with fantastic speakers like tonight. Thank you again. Wishing you all a lovely evening and a Shana Tova.